Women's fashion drastically changed after World War I, for the everyday importance of women's roles in society were increasing. Women's opinions and rights were now more important than ever before. According to an article titled Fashion in the 1920s, social lives after the war were more relaxed and optimistic, which changed the roles of women in society, allowing women to vote and work. Times were changing. Coco Chanel, a major figure in 1920s fashions, comments on this social change. Fashion is not something that exists in dresses only. Fashion is in the sky, in the street. Fashion has to do with ideas, the way we live, what is happening. Women of the 1920s were persistent on displaying their newly prominent roles in society, and through the bold and often forward fashions they wore, they were able to do this.
Prior to the 1920s, women's fashion was extremely conservative. Exposing the slightest amount of skin was seen as scandalous and risque. According to the article 1920s Fashion and Clothing of the 20s, comfort became a new category in the clothing world. It is not only important to dress to the nines, but to feel comfortable doing it. Coco Chanel said, "Fashion has become a joke. The designers have forgotten that they are women inside the dresses. Most women dress for men and want to be admired, but they must also be able to move, to get into a car without bursting their seams. Clothes must have a natural shape." Floor-length dresses, corsets, and complete coverage were things of the past. The new emerging women of the 1920s were known as the flapper. The typical flapper wore knee-length skirts and dresses with tassels, hence the name flapper, bold makeup, and close-cut, short hairstyles. Flappers' clothing reflected their relaxed attitudes towards alcohol, drugs, and sex. Clara Bow, the it girl of the 1920s, demonstrated this loose behavior when she publicly said, "A sex symbol is a heavy load to carry when one is tired, hurt, and bewildered." Although not every woman was a flapper, styles of everyday women became less conservative and restrictive. Women's clothing was one of the most changed aspects of society during the 1920s.
Women used different hairstyles as a way to demonstrate the changed times of post-World War I. The four most common hairstyles for women in the 20s were the bob, the Dutch boy, the shingle, and the Eton crop. However, the bob was the most popular. According to the 1920s fashion and music website, the bob was bowl-shaped and cut just at the ears so as to allow tight-fitting hats. The Dutch boy was square-shaped with clean-cut bangs and angles of hair lining both cheekbones. The shingle hairstyle is characterized by shortly shaved hair on the rear of the head and longer, angled and crimped bangs and layers towards the face. Perhaps the most daring was the Eton crop, in which hair was cut short on all sides and often pressed tightly against the head with gel or mousse.
Makeup during the 1920s was anything but inconspicuous. Women's faces no longer looked the part of the delicate housewife from pre-World War I. Rather, their makeup was bold and forward, much like the attitudes of newly confident women of the 1920s. According to the 1920s makeup guide, women used ashen, ivory, or cream tone powders as a base, accompanied by bright rose, raspberry, or plum blush to make the women seem rosy and cheerful. Eyes were exaggerated using eyeliner at each edge of the eye and to emphasize the eyebrows. Also, dark gray and silver eyeshadows were used on both eyelids and under the eyes to create a smoky effect. Lips were fashioned in the Cupid's bow style in deep reds, deep browns, and orange lipsticks, so that, and I quote, "the lower lip is exaggerated a bit and the width of the lips was de-emphasized."
Fashion of the 1920s set the stage for fashion of the future. After the passing of World War I, women saw the booming economy, the recent women's suffrage movements, and rising opportunities for female employment as a gateway to more risque fashions, and as a way to represent themselves in society. Gone were the long dresses, restrictive underwear, and unbecoming trends. Women of the 1920s used fashion to express the changed societal morals, such as openly drinking, smoking, talking of sex, shortening hemlines, and being known as individuals. Women of the 1920s closely reflect the attitudes of women in today's society. Women fashion their outfits according to what they may be doing or where they are from. For example, women from the North wear casual clothing, as opposed to women in the South who put on their Sunday best every time they walk out the door. The women of the 1920s allowed future generations of women to style themselves based on the societal and economic changes in society.